Oh, and we'll hit play. And I can still see you guys. Beautiful. There were some weird tech glitches last time, so it's okay though. We have it figured out. We're going to switch gears just a little bit today, just in the sense that we're going to go over a little bit of anatomy, in today's lecture, simply because next week, what I really want to dive into is, kind of like the laws that govern our digestion. And so to really, I think, fully have an experience with that, looking at our nervous system, our enteric nervous system, and going over some elements of polyvagal that really open up the parasympathetic nervous system in a way that most people, I would say, don't connect to. Our gut is actually part of our parasympathetic nervous system. And so when we'll use today to dive into the enteric nervous system and just seeing some of the different components of how the gut is actually our second brain, a lot of the physiological aspects that come with what the gut is responsible for. Um, and then, yeah, we'll dive into polyvagal, which will kind of open some things up a little bit more. So if you guys have questions as you go, definitely let me know. But we're going to start with just going over the nervous system. So, our nervous system is our body's real-time survival and regulatory network. It scans, it adjusts, it predicts, it protects, it restores. It's literally giving you unconditional love at all times because it is always working for you, right? It is always doing things to protect, predict, restore. And I know we see those words and maybe there's a little bit of spike of like, oh my gosh, it's doing so much, right? Can you allow yourself to see the beauty in what this thing is doing without knowing, right, from a mental standpoint, all the things that it's doing? Our heart has done the things long before we knew what it was, and what it did. So just being, in that space of accepting and allowing and even just remembering the innate knowledge and intuition that comes with this beautiful vessel that we live in. One thing I like to mention, we hear a lot like we need to regulate our nervous systems, right? The nervous system is not flawed and it's not something that needs to be conquered. And so again, looking in the same way, right, that paradox of the stress response that we did at the beginning, can we begin to see how the output of the nervous system is based on the inputs that come in, right? Our day-to-day choices, are we working with the rules or are we breaking them? And I'll go into more detail on that, partway through where it's prompted. Um, but again, that nervous system is going to be the electronic communication. It's going to send signals in milliseconds, literally before you think. Your nervous system has already decided. Something as simple as going for a walk, right? Maybe you don't see a rock in front of you, or you don't see the unevenness of the terrain, and you stumble and your body, picks itself back up before your brain literally is like, oh, that thing is there, or I need to do this to protect myself, right? Your nervous system is going to be that deciding force before you even think about it. It gatekeeps our metabolism, mood, deals with our immunity, social connection, restoration, and just so much. So this is a different breakdown than what I have historically showed. So if you remember that visual from the first week where we were talking about, the way we've kind of learned about this nervous system as an on-off piece. I am going to break down the different sections, but once we get to polyvagal theory is this beautiful concept that really looks at it speaks to the interconnectedness and everything. I'm not going to say it looks at it through a deep dive piece, but as it pulls these different understandings together, one of the things that it says is this is one entire network system, and it's not separate. So when we look at our nervous system, right at the top, we have peripheral nervous system on the left, central nervous system on the right. The central nervous system is going to be your brain and your spinal column. I always like to say brain stem. You'll see we're going to use brain just for the purpose of today. Um, At some point, we will drop into how the brain takes a bottom up, back forward approach. And just to kind of give you a quick overview of that, if you were to actually look at your hand, your brain is going to be, it can be divided into three larger sections. Now, there's going to be a lot of different things that occur within each section and come together, but just from a very, rudimentary standpoint, animals, your brain stem, which is going to be your animal brain, think about that as kind of like the base of the palm, your wrist. If you make the number four, think about this as your limbic system. This is your emotional regulation. Close the fingers down, prefrontal cortex up here in the front. This is going to be our cognition, our thinking. This comes last. So when we talk about the brain taking a bottom-up approach, this is what we're referring to. Information is going to move through that animal brain. It's going to move into the limbic system, and then it comes to that prefrontal cortex to assign meaning. That back forward, again, is a very similar but deeper aspect of because these are three, sections that are composed of deeper aspects. You'll see in the next couple slides when we dive into deceptions, there are going to be different divisions where information can continue to move through a process or it can be gatekept. And I'm actually going to have a guest speaker come in on Friday for office hours. She's a physical therapist in Idaho. Not a physical therapist, excuse me. She's a massage therapist. Dear friend of mine, but she really works a lot with post-traumatic stress. She's a CrossFit trainer, so she also just really has this beautiful view and conception of the body. So she'll speak to that a lot more. But just for today, right? Central nervous system, spinal cord, brain, quick overview of the brain. That peripheral nervous system is going to be the connection of the spinal cord to the rest of the body. It's going to act as a relay for sensory information, motor commands. It consists of nerves outside of that central nervous system, which are going to include cranial nerves and spinal nerves. It's going to control, and this is where that drop happens between the autonomic and the somatic. It's going to control voluntary movements. Those voluntary movements are the somatic branch. Those are skeletal muscles. And it's going to control involuntary movements, which is the autonomic. Those are going to be involuntary movements of internal organs, glands. Involuntary meaning we don't consciously have to direct that to happen in order for it to happen, right? So there's a lot of processes within organs, glands, even just think about you blinking, right? You're not telling yourself to blink until you bring awareness to the fact that you're blinking, and then maybe you say it and then you blink, but there are so many processes that happen internally that um, that's where those will reside. Within that autonomic, we have three. So we have the sympathetic, the enteric, and the parasympathetic. Um, like I said, we're pretty familiar with that sympathetic and parasympathetic as far as, just regular information online. That enteric, not so familiar with. So again, autonomic means automatic. It just happens. We're going to go over those three components of the sympathetic, the parasympathetic, and the enteric. So that sympathetic branch is going to be your mobilization being activated. This is immediate fight or flight triggered by true threat. Threat that activates SAM and HPA is going to create an experience on the subcognition plane that prepares us to fight, run, or freeze. And I just want to go forward real fast because I want to show you this photo of what I mean by that. That bottom up is going to be this proprioception, interoception, exteroception, nociception, excuse me. We'll get into those at a later time. Think about all these things as you can either move through to the next level or that information doesn't need to go there. That subcognition is reception and perception. So we're not thinking yet. That's what cognition is. The subcognition is right below that and is still something that these nerves are interfacing with rather than us putting meaning to that. When this is truly activated, right, that sympathetic branch, you're going to notice increased heart rate, raised blood pressure, dilated pupils, that increase in glucose, right? There's going to be a redirection of blood from digestion towards muscles to prepare them to fight, run, or freeze. And this freeze is not necessarily shut down. We're going to go over that at the end of today in that polyvagal aspect. This freeze is going to kind of be that you're still ready to run or fight, but at that point, it's not a shutdown. It's a let me hold this energy in a contained space. So when I'm ready to use it, it's available to me. So it's a little different than the shutdown, which we'll go over in a little bit. Something just to consider as we talk about that cognition piece, right? We've been taught that this branch is also responsible for problem solving, performing, acting. And I just kind of want to make that differentiation where true fight or flight is not going to involve your prefrontal cortex. You're not going to really think or organize or rationalize thoughts because the energy needs to be diverted from this place in order for that bottom up, back front approach to take place. And so that information, right, from that animal's brainstem is going to get diverted and sent back to the body to act, not to think. So if you find yourself, and we've talked about this in a couple different series, right, throughout the weeks, if you find yourself in states where you're actively able to consider cognitions and you're still feeling that energy in the body, right, it's a slightly different approach that you get to take then, um, rather than just the conceptualization of this. Um, Again, just kind of highlighting in that fight or flight, that high level logical thinking is generally not engaged and it's often suppressed because that amygdala is going to take over. Immediate survival, blood flow, and activity to the prefrontal cortex is going to go down. Because again, at that point, that body knows what it needs to do based on the available energy that it has, based on the information coming in and what it is receiving and what's in front of us, or even around us or within us. If that true sympathetic activation stays on for too long, or that HPA cortisol stays on long term, we can see digestion slowing down. We can see sleep disruptions, destabilization of blood sugar, shift in hormones, rise in inflammation. And again, this is stuff that we've talked about in week one. The parasympathetic branch is going to be your restoration. So this is going to slow things down. All the things that went up are now going to come down as a result of this. You're going to see that heart rate lower. You're going to see your digestion being turned back on, which is going to allow for nutrient absorption to begin, cellular repair to occur, and that immune function balance to kind of come back online. As we go through the enteric nervous system, you'll see these three pieces are really significant as far as digestion returning, nutrient absorption happening, and that cellular repair occurring. Because if you recall from last week when we were talking about light, that midday sun, or well, even the morning sun, that morning sun is going to help turn on metabolic activity, right? But that midday sun is actually going to help with immune system function. And all of our immune is in our gut. So based on the quality of that gut microbiome is going to be how our immune system is able to function and host whatever repair needs to happen in the body. So again, we're taught in here very simple rest and digest, but there's so much more to this rather than just being calm. And we'll talk about that social engagement again, referenced in polyvagal at the end. This is where that enteric branch is going to come into play now. So the ENS is going to be this independent network of neurons embedded in the walls of the GI tract. It's going to stretch from the esophagus all the way to the anus. This is known as the second brain. It's going to regulate digestion, motility. Motility is going to be kind of, it's not like joint mobility, but it's going to be mobility of how that digestion process happens. Immune responses, blood flow, and all of this is going to function independently of the central nervous system because this is part of the parasympathetic nervous system. If you really want to go into the diagram, you guys are absolutely welcome to Google those aspects and what plays a role in what later. Um, the gut brain axis up is going to be that information is received from the nervous system, moves up to the brain. The brain gut down is what someone would call a top-down approach, and that occurs as I've read about it, technically after the bottom up approach. Top down means that The brain is going to pull from the schemas, right? The foundational concepts that it has about something to then interact after. So again, all of that is going to be a cognition piece that after that information moves to that prefrontal cortex, we're then accessing information. I don't know that we've spoken on this, but you can find this information in the Jungian immersion document that's like 35 pages in the Google Drive. I'll probably pull that up or speak to it at some point this week just for reference. But just how memories are stored and basically the idea of a schema. The brain creates these foundational concepts of how you understand something. So the first time you went to the grocery store as an adolescent by yourself, you already knew what to do because of the times that you've gone, right? So even if you were to step into a new environment, terrain, right? Like maybe the first time that first day of high school, right? You kind of have an idea of what to do, where to go because of the other campuses that you've been on, right? Elementary school, junior high. Um, my mom worked at a college, so I feel like I was always in education in some way, shape, or form where you take these experiences and you create these understandings. Kind of like the movie Inside Out for people who have seen that. You have those balls with the islands at the end. Think of it in that way, but rather than it being a memory that extends to something, think about that golden ball as something that's present that you're interacting with and you're recalling, and then that information is coming through for today. So that's what the brain gut access top down approach is. So why do we talk about the gut? There's a lot of reasons to talk about the gut, but I want to highlight these two pieces because this is what you see the most in mental health. 90 to 95% of the body's total serotonin is made within the gut, specifically within a certain cell in the GI mucus. Only about 1 to 2% is produced in the actual brain itself. The gut also produces about 50% of the body's dopamine. And many of those neurotransmitters are going to be very identical to the brain. So you'll hear different doctors on various podcasts talk about how the gut microbiome hosts the same complexity as that brain microbiome. There's one in particular, and I'm blanking on his name. But the podcast is Know Thyself, and I will find it and link it in the references for today. But when we can really see that complexity between the two, and then really understand how these two aspects talk, which we'll dive into in various parts for today. Again, you just have a new understanding of how your whole system is interconnected and communicates and works and all those beautiful things. I wanted to highlight this piece because one of the things that really encouraged this series to come about, but even in individual work that I do with clients, a lot of traditional psychotherapy, right, comes with medication management for symptom management. And so I want to just highlight this because some of the things that we're taught, right, blatantly speaking, isn't the whole truth. So this quote actually came from marketing. While produced in the gut, speaking to serotonin, right? This serotonin cannot cross the blood-brain barrier. And then you see marketing for SSRIs. Well, SSRIs can cross the blood-brain barrier to impact the central nervous system, right? And so if you didn't know any of the things that we've talked about already, or one of the things that I'm about to speak to, you're going to take this to mean a certain something. If either one of you want to share kind of what, stands out to you as you read this and kind of take this in, you're definitely welcome to. Um,
I think it's just always so funny how, like, marketing, I don't know, I think about even just like greenwashing and all these, there's just like, it's so interesting how, like, it can really just like make you think something is good. And then you do more research and you find just like a whole bunch of information maybe going against that. So, but this is a really interesting, oh, sorry about the pup. Very interesting quote here.
yeah, right. And to me, just when I read this at first, I was like, there's kind of this slight hint, or I would say suggestion, that because this is produced in the gut and can't cross the blood-brain barrier. And mental health is the gut, or I'm sorry, not the gut, excuse me. Mental health, everything's in the mind, right? We think like, oh, when I take this medication, it's helping the serotonin in my mind, right? Or my brain, I should say. And this thing can help do that. When we actually really look at serotonin, serotonin influences the brain through the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve we'll actually go into right now. It's one of the 12 cranial nerves, and it emerges from the stem of our brain, connects to the torso, various parts of our head, neck, face. You'll see how it drops down to the left and the right, and then inverts in various ways through all the different organs. But right, if marketing is saying like, oh, you need this thing to facilitate this thing, but in all actuality, this thing here is what facilitates it, do we even need this thing then? And the vagus nerve is something that I would say over the last 5 years has really kind of made this show, right? As far as marketing, and you hear a lot of coaches and probably other therapists. I'm gonna hit escape because there's a couple messages in the chat, and um, I wanna see. Oh, no worries. I see your guys' responses there. How do I go back? I'm still screen sharing. Here we go. Um, So yeah, as I was saying, it's something. Oh, but now I can't see you guys. I don't know why it does this. Um, where was I? Something relatively new that yeah, over the last 5 years, like I was saying, has come into the picture as far as education and even being able to regulate your vagus nerve, right? Different tips and tricks as far as like, you know, humming or splashing cold water on your face. And again, when you begin, we're not going to go into the vagus nerve in depth today. But for those that are interested, I would definitely encourage you to deep dive into what this cranial nerve has the capacity to do and how you work with it so that you start to work with the rules of the body instead of working against them. That vagus nerve, as I was just saying, is going to send those messages to and from the brain. It's going to allow you to speak, swallow, digest food, breathe, pump blood, and all the various things. These are just quotes from that website at the bottom. So the term vagus nerve gets its name from the Latin term vagary, which means wandering. So you see how it moves throughout, and it's made up of more than 200,000 individual nerve fibers, excuse me. So when you begin to see the complexity of this, right? The vagus nerve is a major information superhighway sending signals that act as reflexes to control how the critical organs in the body operate. I like to think of it as an orchestra of 200,000 instruments that produce a balanced output or a harmony that contributes to the body's ability to function properly. Right? Again, we have even just in that piece there this beautiful acknowledgement of balanced output, right? Harmony, function properly even if something is happening, right? Again, just going back to that invitation, what's the input? Can we start to change the input to create that output? Because the body is always functioning properly based on what it's receiving. So just to kind of go in quickly into serotonin and dopamine, both of them are neurotransmitters, both of them are hormones. Serotonin is going to be responsible for stabilizing mood, regulating sleep-wake cycles, managing appetite, and supporting cognitive functions like memory and emotion. Dopamine is going to be something that gets released, excuse me, during more enjoyable activities. So eating, socializing, achieving goals, maybe even just, sitting down for dinner with a group of friends, right? That enjoyable aspect is going to reinforce behaviors, making you want to repeat them. It's going to aid in regulating movement of heart, kidney, sleep, which ultimately is going to be everything when we go back to that traditional Chinese medicine, right? And what restoration happens while we're sleeping. So it's not just us asleep, but as we are asleep, what functions, what organs are moving, and what cellular repairs are occurring. All of that is going to be part of dopamine as well. Um, we will see low levels of dopamine, even low links of serotonin connected to depression, lack of focus, Parkinson's disease. One of the things that I want to highlight down here at the bottom is because it is a neurotransmitter, excuse me, that's involved in addictive substances and behaviors, artificial surges of dopamine can hijack this reward system. So something that is actually enjoyable, right? And not necessarily enjoyable to the mind, but enjoyable to the body, right? Something like socializing or maybe even going for a run or exercising or moving in a certain way, right? Maybe um in the mind you're like, oh, I have to go do that today, right? But then you do it and your body's like, man, that feels really good. Real dopamine is going to be released from meaningful effort-based actions that create lasting satisfaction, where artificial or fake dopamine is going to stem from this high stimulation, low effort activity, like this guy, social media, etc. That's going to give you a quick temporary thrill, and then you're going to crave something and you're going to want more of it after. If anybody has seen The Social Dilemma, if you have not, highly recommend it. It is a documentary. It used to be on Netflix, but they interview prominent, not necessarily CEOs, but high-ranking officials or old high-ranking officials within various tech app-based companies that share and speak to meetings and how these companies are, or these platforms, applications, excuse me, are set up to basically induce this artificial dopamine. I was reading somewhere the other day, I can't remember how much it was, but even like a bag of Doritos, right? I think Doritos, it said, spent $2 billion on their, we're going to use the word equation for how to create a chip, literal eating chip, that created this effect so that you have these cravings and this potential addiction that happens afterwards, right? That may be a lot of money, but if we can get someone to buy a bag for 3, 4, 5, $6, and then they want it again the next day and the next day and the next day, right? There's still that process is using this dopamine highway reward system, but it's not that meaningful effort-based action that's going to give you real change and satisfaction. It's going to be, again, that high stimulation, um, low effort activity that's going to give you, most of the time, uh, a blood sugar crash. So we see, just as I was speaking to earlier, low level serotonin, and low dopamine, you're going to have significant mental and physical health side effects of that. Depression, anxiety, mood swings, insomnia, digestive problems. We'll get to that. It can cause fatigue, memory issues, irritability. Again, you see chronic stress, vitamin deficiencies. When the gut is not able to, and I invite back to those three aspects of the enteric nervous system, right? When that gut is turned on and immune system is able to be function and active, and we're able to actually engage in nutrient absorptions from our food because we're in parasympathetic, right? That's going to create a very different outcome than if we have these uh, stress responses that are going to contribute to of the enteric nervous system that then is going to create low levels of serotonin and dopamine because of the stress, right? Or whatever it is, lifestyle rule wise, that's being broken, that you're going to have then these vitamin deficiencies because the gut in the reactive oxidative stress piece, whether it is mitochondrial dysfunction or from a true sympathetic nervous system, that digestion is turned off. So you're not going to be able to absorb vitamins. You're not going to be able to go through those processes because they're two separate states. Hopefully that makes sense, and we'll kind of dive into more of those pieces next week. This is kind of why I want to set the foundation for today. So when we start working with those rules, we can see where they come into play and how they come into play. Um, Again, something just to think about, low serotonin and low dopamine are not the causes for these things, right? They are the effects. And if we know metabolism is that consistent cycling of energy, right? Input to an output, that output is now an input for something else. There are other causes of low serotonin and dopamine. Um, to escape for just a second so I can see you guys. Any questions so far? And then I'll go back to the recording or the slideshow.
Question for you, Megan. Does dopamine and serotonin occur at the same time? I understand when dopamine occurs, but when does serotonin occur?
What do you
Like,
mean?
when does it get released? Like, is it during a specific activity or is serotonin more just like,
Oh, I see. So like dopamine is more that like high level engagement.
mhm.
Got it. Or is that what you're asking?
Yeah,
Like
like dopamine, I understand like, oh, you do things that raise your dopamine, but is there something like that with serotonin?
that's a great question. I'm not 100% sure. I can look into that. Um,
Or is it just like a hormone that's just in the body
I
that,
I would imagine just based on, and I'll dive into that. That's a great question.
okay.
I'm not 100% sure. What I will say to that is it's going to be something that is created based on the varietal of inputs, right? So when you
Mhm.
are out in the morning and you are engaging with that morning sunlight because it starts metabolic processes,
Mhm.
that light is literally going to turn on your digestive system, which is going to start supporting that serotonin process. As far as the actual, like, how is serotonin made, I'm not 100% sure. But I'll look into that and see what some of those aspects are. My guess is that serotonin is going to be produced more just because of the pieces that we just spoke to when we are actually able to be in more consistent states of parasympathetic. Um,
Mhm.
Simply because, mood, digestion, sleep, all of that is going to come when we're in a state of being able to take in all of those inputs and the cellular aspects within us feel safe, right? And I
Mhm.
put those words in quotes because it's literally then going to be all of those metabolic processes, even just going back to what the mitochondria is taking in to be able to produce ATP, right?
Mhm.
All of that is going to tie into how that serotonin is made. But I'll look specifically into that for you because I'm not.
Thank you. That was super helpful, and I appreciate it.
Let me make a little note real fast. Any other questions? We'll take that as a no. Um, so, I had this question here at the bottom, right? If we know metabolism is a consistent cycling of energy, what are the causes of low serotonin, dopamine? And we've talked about a few of them, just kind of in what we just spoke about. So we might highlight some of that again as we go back to some of those aspects we know, right? That second brain, like we said, is going to regulate digestion, motility. Again, motility being the digestive path and how mobile all of that is, right? So if there's any blockage or any you know, GI issues, that motility is going to be decreased because of those pieces. That second brain is also going to regulate immune response, blood flow. It's also going to be directly impacted by that reactive oxygen species, that ROS, which is going to increase oxidative stress in the body. It's also going to be directly impacted by high blood sugar. And so again, when we look at, right, these 37 trillion cells that serve a variety of different functions within our body, that gut being even our second brain and hosting a good chunk of those cells, right? What impacts one cellular system is going to impact the entire body. And so when we look at the enteric nervous system and its exposure to reactive oxygen species or just increased oxidative stress, we're going to see a variety of different things. And I put this in here because a lot of the times we see, right, with medical or mental health, these gut concerns, right? We see a lot of diagnoses, even from the medical community, that speak to, again, a take this thing to help with this symptom rather than going to the actual root of what that symptom is telling us about the state and quality of the body and what then we have the ability to do to change that or work with that. So we will see enteric neuropathy, which is going to just be damage to the neural membranes within the enteric nervous system, triggering apoptosis. We talked about this, I believe, last week when we were talking about sleep, that apoptosis is programmed cell death. So all of our, um, I shouldn't say all of our cells. I guess all of our cells have the ability to, if it comes to it. Um, when we are in that rest and repair, part of that rest and repair is actually allowing cells that are not able to be repaired to go through a cellular death, that then there is a metabolic waste aspect that can clean those up and take those out and allow new cells to grow. So this neuropathy, this increased oxidative stress is going to damage neural membranes and it's going to trigger this to happen automatically. We're going to see inflammation. So again, those enteric glial cells, and they're going to produce more inflammatory cytokines, and that's going to cause a degeneration of the neural connections within that enteric nervous system. Again, we're going to see motility dysfunction. So you're going to see things like constipation or gastrointestinal disease. Again, that motility is not like physical mobility, but in which the ease and flow in which digestion occurs. And you're also then going to see these high levels implicated in various diseases, right? You're going to see this in diabetes. You're going to see this type of increased oxidative stress and chemotherapy-induced side effects. So really this gut plays a very big role, right? As far as dopamine, serotonin, immune system functioning, ability to literally digest food, absorb nutrients from that. And we see, right, when we are under that increased stress and whatever capacity of that input, whatever input is creating that increased stress, we're now seeing outputs from that. Um, I wanted to add this slide because according to Google, I love Google, it's so funny. We're going to see factors of this ROS damage come from chronic alcohol consumption, high fat diets, aging, and enteric infections, such as H. pylori or other gut infections. And so, again, if you guys, are able to unmute and want to share, you're definitely welcome to. But something I want you, whether this is a rhetorical question or something to speak on, what else from what you've learned over this month so far causes reactive oxygen species? What else causes these oxidative stress levels to increase? What causes mitochondrial damage, right? Because we can say that, on a very surface level, this thing is leading to this thing, right? But these four things, that's like one sliver of the whole, of the whole pie, basically. Um, down here I have, light correspondence, right? So when we were speaking last week about even just, are you taking in the same frequency of light with your eyes and with your skin, right? If you're not, and there's an incongruence in that, your body is going to create ROS. If you are engaging in blue light after the sun goes down, you're triggering to the brain. This blue light is saying, hey, it's time to wake up, when the rest of your body is taking in an input that says, no, it's actually time to go to sleep, right? That's going to create that blood sugar. We're going to go into food and digestion next week. So things that spike our blood sugar, right, and bring it back down. Um, that can add to it. Even mobility, and I mean physical mobility, right? If we are sedentary or um, not moving throughout the day. We'll talk about this probably more in the movement piece, but I pulled up some information. Every hour, we want to be moving for about 15 minutes. And so if you really consider just, or standing up at least, if you really consider how many of us sit, right? And whether that's a 9 to 5 or I don't know about you guys, but I traveled for the holiday weekend. It was about a 3 hour drive one way and about a 3 hour drive back, and we stopped, halfway each way to let the dog out and whatnot. But if you're sitting for those 3 hours, right, that's going to create a level of stress because the body is not intended to be still or sitting for that long. Um, Again, we're going to go over rules of digestion next week, but I wanted to give this analogy. And I know some of you have heard it already, but I think this is really very potent um, as far as looking specifically at rules of digestion, but then even just a broader invitation. And we might have to save polyvagal for Friday just because of time. I was kind of afraid of that. This one's a little longer. Um, Imagine yourself, close your eyes, and just imagine that you are watching a horror movie. Okay. Maybe you're getting ready to go to the movie theater and you're like, should I bring some food with me? Should I pick up some popcorn there, right? Should I bring something healthier like an apple? Can I just grab some food there? You may have a conversation in your head of what's healthier to eat, right? An apple, bag of popcorn, hot dog, candy, etc. A body that is stressed out is not supposed to be eating anything at that point, right? Because when we really go back to that sympathetic nervous system, that digestion, the blood flow to the gut shuts down, that digestion slows down. Because in that moment, we don't need the blood flow to that for that process to work. We need to work with what's in front of us to fight the thing, run away, make sure that we are safe. So if we are eating when our body is stressed, even if we say, I handle stress well, we're breaking one of the biggest rules, right? Where we're giving something to the body that the body's not ready to have. Um, and we'll talk about this in polyvagal as far as ventral vagal and connection, because there are going to be some things that you can do to really move yourself into parasympathetic before you eat, right? So I just invite that analogy because we may end up getting caught in that, is it this or is it this? But when we really take a couple steps back and see the state, is that state that we're in even supposed to be doing that thing at that time? So something just to consider, right? Because again, going back to this slide, according to Google, these four things are the most common factors for that enteric damage as a result of ROS and what causes ROS. But ultimately, there's so many things that we engage in, right, that are going to create that experience because we aren't taught the rules of how the body plays. I want to come out of this real fast. Any questions so far on that?
Nope.
No. Okay. Beautiful. So another thing I wanted to touch on was increased blood sugar. High blood sugar is also going to create that damage to the enteric nervous system. Again, we talked about that with intestinal motility, blood flow, secretion. This is going to lead, if over time and chronic, to diabetic neuropathy. We're going to see reduced nerve signaling. If you go back even to lesson one, right, and how cells operate and how cells communicate, right? We're going to see loss of those nerve signalings. We're going to see even a deterioration of the myelin sheath, which is going to allow for that communication to happen. We're going to see gastroparesis, which is slow digestion, but there's just going to be a host of things that occur. I'm going to go over this very quickly. There's that little star, there's a comment and a link to I forget Ozempic. It's the Ozempic website. Um I'll come back to that in another teaching. I'll add a little video on that. Um I wanted to bring it up because when we look at, right, the enteric nervous system regulating blood sugar by sensing glucose in the gut and communicating with the brain, the gut, excuse me, is part of that glucose absorption. Um, and so in that, it's going to trigger the release of metabolic hormones like GLP-1. And one of the biggest um, things on the market right now is Ozempic, which is supposed to help with that. But in all actuality, if you go to the website, which is linked there, you're going to see a variety of different things. One, none of this is spoken upon. If you go to the list of side effects, most of the side effects are things that are already being experienced. And in the corner, it speaks to, this should be used with uh, exercise and diet, right? But again, exercise and diet are trying to change something or manipulate an outcome rather than learning the rules of how to play, right? Yes, going to the gym can be helpful. And how can you, right, if we're supposed to be up and moving most of the day, create a life or a lifestyle around allowing for that movement to occur, even if it's just simply standing, right? When we come to eating, again, going back to those rules of, well, is it the apple or the popcorn? Well, of course, the apple is healthier. And if the body's not supposed to be eating at a certain time, working with that is a very different explanation than just saying diet, right? So I'll leave that just as a quick synopsis. Just a quick page of common gut issues and disorders. We see things, right, as far as terms and diagnoses like irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's disease, um, ulcerative colitis, acid reflux, GERD, food intolerances, celiac, lactose. Um, all of these issues and disorders are going to be aspects of gut metabolism, right? And looking again at that enteric nervous system as a critical piece of why and how these things come to be as part of the output that we now label as a disorder. Other aspects as well, as far as issues and disorders, stomach flu, gastritis. We can see gallstones, ulcers, constipation, gas, indigestion, abdominal pain. Um, again, more gut issues, more common causes and factors that are very surface level to what we're taught is the medical explanation for what's happening in our body. Um, Just for time, I'm going to save the polyvagal for later because it's another probably like 10 to 12 slides. So I think what I'll do just for time and to honor the time set for this, I will do that as a office hours, whether it is this Friday in conjunction to the conversation with Bethany, or we will do it, or I will do it, excuse me, just as another recording and upload it as an extra piece. So we're gonna stop there. I had a feeling I was gonna run out of time, but that's okay. Any questions on any of those pieces for today?
No, but I did love that GLP-1 example because I think it ties into what you were saying. And I think our first session about thyroid medication and how like we've kind of been set up in a way to kind of blame our symptoms and find an answer when like in reality there's a way to even just prevent our symptoms in the first place that we're not being told about.
Yep.
So I thought that was a good example to look at.
Absolutely. Let me, since we have, a minute, I'm just going to pull it up real fast in a separate tab. It's just so fascinating to look at the marketing on these things. And I say this again, I know that this has actually helped people and I'm not casting shame or anything of that. I really believe in true informed consent. And most of the time when you sit down with a doctor, you get 2 minutes, if that, of, well, here, this thing can help you and this is why. But it doesn't explain a lot of the pieces of the deeper meanings, like you were saying, right? So yes, it can, lower blood sugar and A1C when used with diet and exercise. Those two pieces alone are going to just make a huge effect, right? Yes, it can lower risks of certain things, but lifestyle can do that as well. So down here is what I was speaking to. Let's pull up this read more. Uh, as far as, the diet exercise piece, improving blood sugar, excuse me. But then we have here may cause serious side effects, including possible thyroid tumors, cancers, shortness of breath, trouble swallowing, issues with the neck. Again, we see thyroid. So, even taking into consideration that metabolic aspect of thyroid that we were speaking about, right? What is this doing to the mitochondrial functions? What is this doing to the ability for our body to naturally metabolize its own energy? Because ultimately, even if you come down here, right, it says like don't use Ozempic if X, Y, and Z. Um, but then we come here to side effects. So again, we have inflammation in the pancreas. Every part of our body is important. What the pancreas does, I can't tell you right now because I don't know, but it is part of, that traditional Chinese medicine 24-hour clock. It serves a role. We have changes in vision, right? So even changes in vision is going to change our rods and cones, which is then going to change how we take in light. um, Side effects, low blood sugar, right? So we might actually have crashes. That is also going to signal to the body to make more oxidate or more glucose, excuse me. And if the mitochondria can't take that in, now we're going to have more oxidative stress in the body, right? We're going to have stomach problems, allergic reactions. So all of these things, right? Yes, it may help with some of these things, but over time, you're also going to see, like, I don't look at these as side effects. I look at these as co-effects. Because at the end of the day, if it has the ability to do this, my number one question is, what is this doing to the mitochondrial function? How
Mm.
is it creating dysfunction? And because everything comes from that mitochondria, right, we see the things already happening. Where does another intervention come in instead of something like this? But yeah, this stuff is just fascinating to me. It's fascinating. But that's one of the things when you can start to see all of this as marketing, right? One of the invitations that I offer is if you can scan, if you like can scan a barcode, right? Your body can probably make it. The
Mm.
question is how? Can you learn how the body naturally does that? Or it's a resource that the earth actually has available that we can use. Just the way that we've, been taught to look at things and the way the systems operate. Uh, it's easier to take something, right, than to make changes that change you. So, quick overview of that. But that is where we will leave for today. Like I said, I will do a separate video of polyvagal, or maybe we'll start with that next week. We'll see how I want to shake that out. But any questions or anything?
No, thank you so much, Megan. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Yeah, we'll dive into rules of digestion next week. Those are fun because again, we really start to just see, right, how we can make very simple, subtle changes that will create very, very different outputs. So we'll dive into that next week. But this, I think, really kind of sets the foundation of like, oh, this is how and why. And I will do some research and answer your question about serotonin and how it's made. And I'll get back to you on that with a little video.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
You too. You too.
Bye.